Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome to yet another timely, lively, and informative fall publishing webinar. I'm Chris Beytes, editor of GrowerTalks and Green Profit magazines and the e-newsletter Acres Online, and I'm going to be your host for the next 50 or 55 minutes or so as we tackle today's topic. You see it on your screen: hydroponic lettuce production, water, media, nutrition, and best practices. Now, whether you're an experienced grower, just getting started, or just thinking about hydroponics, today's webinar is guaranteed to have something for you. Now, if the topic sounds familiar to you, it's because we actually presented this a few weeks ago, except the internet gods kind of let us down and we had a technical glitch that prevented us from completing and recording the whole webinar. So, hence this redo. For those of you who joined us then and are back today, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it. And for those of you who are new to the webinar, welcome. Now, as usual, I am not the expert on the topic, but I know who is. And in fact, we've got two experts, and they're both doctors. First, Dr. Cari Peters, Vice President of Cari Peters Incorporated. Welcome, Cari.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me again. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you.
Yeah, ECU, I like that. Now, one of the fun things about webinars, and I always say it, is you can do it from any place. I suppose you have your toes in the sand somewhere right now, huh, Cari?
Oh, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. How did you know?
So where are you broadcasting from?
I'm in Allentown, Pennsylvania at our manufacturing facility. So it is not snowing here finally. I think we have turned the corner and we're just about to start spring. Thank goodness.
Hey, same here in Chicago. And I have to ask, are your hands blue due to that famous fertilizer that your family formulates?
Sometimes, but not today.
Good. She washed up for us. Good, folks.
Yep.
Now, our second doctor is Dr. Vijay Rapaka, Manager of Grower Research for Oasis Grower Solutions. Welcome, Vijay.
Thank you. Hi, Chris, and hi, everybody.
Wow, look at that sweater. That sweater is fertilizer blue. you look lovely today. Vijay, where are you broadcasting from today?
I am from Kent, Ohio. I'm at our research and development facility here in Kent.
Ohio, New Jersey, and I am broadcasting live, as usual, working the controls from the Ball Publishing broadcast studios, where it was supposed to be 60 degrees today, but it's not. Winter has not quite released its grasp upon us. But never mind the weather, let's talk webinars. That's what we're here for. First, a special thanks to our sponsors, Oasis Grower Products and Cari Peters. They are the folks who put free in free webinar, so thank you very much for that. A couple of quick things. If you've done our webinars before, you know that we have there's a Q&A. Well, I like the chat area. On the side of your screen, you'll see a chat area. Put any questions that you have into that area and send it to us, and we'll get to them either as we go along or at the end. There's also a Q&A area. You can use that as well, but that means I'm keeping my eye on two spots on the screen instead of one, and I'm not that coordinated. But if something goes wrong on your end and you have to sign off from the webinar, a customer comes in or something like that, fear not. The webinar will be archived at ballpublishing.com/webinars. It's the same place you signed up for. Now, one thing I want to do, our experts, Cari and Vijay, asked me to do a poll. And I'm going to open a poll right now on your screen. You'll see it on your control panel. We have 5 minutes to answer it, and I've got a question. What is your hydroponic experience level? I want to know if you're currently growing hydroponics, if you're getting set to do it, if you're seriously considering it, or if you're just kind of curious about the whole topic, because they wanted to know where everybody stands on that. So we're going to let that poll go as we roll along, and I'll give them the information. So that said, Cari, are you all set to take it away?
I am, Chris. Thanks a lot. Let's go. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. It is so important that we got this time to talk to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to give a little listen, hopefully over lunch or a snack or something. So, okay, today we're going to talk about hydroponic lettuce production. So as you know, I'm from Cari Peters. We are the designer, formulator, and producer of the Jax Professional and Jax Classic products. We are located in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and my role is pretty much a formulator, researcher, and I do a lot of the technical support. You probably, if you've ever called us on the phone, got a chance to chat with me or my counterpart, Crystal Snyder, but that's what we do.
You helped me out with a question just today, as a matter of fact, on behalf of a reader. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello again, Vijay Rapaka. I am the R&D manager and also the technical support manager here at the Smithers-Oasis company. Been here with the company for a little over 7.5 years now, and my specialization is in plant propagation and propagation media. And Oasis Grower Solutions is a part of Smithers-Oasis company, which is a global company located, manufactures product in 19 different countries. And the first thing we introduced was our floral foam, and then we came out with our phenolic media that is in 1969. And we are committed to bring new product to this industry, mainly to improve the performance of the plants, root faster, grow faster, finish faster, and so on. And our products include the propagation media, post-harvest products, and cleaners and disinfectants. Okay.
All right, so today, I know some of you have joined us before, but I'm assuming that there may be some new people here. So we're going to move through some of these topics a little bit faster just so we can get to some of the information that we may have missed last. It's important, so we're going to review. So we're going to talk about our hydroponic systems, the water source, different nutrients, young plant production, our fertilizer target, and lastly, some frequently asked questions that we have received. Okay, so, you know, hydroponics is out there. Everyone's hearing it. It seems like such a buzzword. But, you know, hydroponics has been around quite a long time. Actually, my grandfather, Bob Peters, who started our company, he began doing his nutrition work with roses in gravel culture, which was, you know, a type of hydroponics that they did back in the 1940s. But the definition of hydroponics really just means a method of growing plants using a mineral nutrient solution in water without soil. So why all of a sudden is it so important, right? Well, you know all of these type of things. Seeing these cute little trucks all over the roads, which I absolutely love, Great Lakes Growers little van there. But basically, there's increasing populations. People are demanding fresher food with more flavor and quality and would like something that's grown locally. Plus, there's a lot of different increasing costs between the fuel that you have to do and the size considerations. That hydroponics gives you a great advantage that allows you to grow efficiently, slightly flexible, and can do this all year round.
Okay. Talk about getting into the lettuce. Lettuce is typically a 6-week crop, and it takes 2 weeks for propagation and 4 weeks after transplant to harvest. Again, this is totally dependent on the season, mainly the light levels, but typically it's a 6-week crop. And after 2 weeks after you seed, the seedlings are ready to be transplanted in the main system. You can separate these seedlings and you can transplant into the NFT system or raft system, and I will walk through some of those systems in the next few slides. Okay?
All right. Hang on, our poll was just finishing up, and it won't let me change the slide while that was going on. So let's see if we can reveal how the breakdown is. 32% are currently growing. 9% are getting set up to grow hydroponically, 23% seriously considering, and 16% just curious. So about a third of our attendees out there are currently growing hydroponic lettuce, and a quarter seriously considering it. So there you go.
Very interesting. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Next, let's walk through some of these systems that are commonly used. I'm not going to go into all the details, but again, we can talk about it at a later point if you have further questions. This is just to briefly introduce some of the systems. The first, the NFT system, raft system, ebb and flood, and a little bit about vertical farming. Okay, the first one is the NFT system. It's NFT stands for Nutrient Film Technique. It's basically a thin film of nutrient solution that is being constantly recirculated in these channels. And you have, once you transplant the seedlings, as you can see on the left side, the seedling is going into these channels, and for the next 4 weeks, it's going to finish, it's going to start growing these roots into this nutrient solution. So the roots starts growing in this shallow stream of water, and you can do crops like lettuce, basil, and any short-term leafy greens you can do grow in the NFT system. And NFT system, again, it uses a very low amount of nutrient solution. It will be constantly recirculated, and it is very easy to heat the nutrient solution during winter months, or even to cool down during summer to minimize any of the negative effects like bolting and so on. But NFT system is actually, it's a very sensitive system. Any clogging of these pipes or filters can cause failures, clog up the whole system, and so got to watch for that. Okay, moving on to the next slide. This is a automated version of the NFT system. It's basically the same NFT technique, but the only thing is it's a mobile gutter. It's called mobile gutter system. Basically, these channels can be spaced as the crop is growing. So for the first 1 week, you can have a tight spacing, and as the crop is growing, you can space it out, and it works very well for a large-scale commercial operation. Okay, the next one is a raft system, and this system uses a large tank or a shallow pond, and you have nutrient solution in these tanks or ponds, and you have the rafts made up of styrofoam or the polystyrene. It's floating on the top of these ponds, and the seedlings can be inserted right into these rafts, and these rafts go on to these the nutrient solution. And the pools act as a conveyor belt, so it's, again, you can use this as a transportation for harvesting and also when you're transplanting and so on. The temperature fluctuations are very limited in this because you're dealing with a large amount of water here. And typically, to use this system very effectively, you have to do multiple transplants. A lot of growers go typically with 72 seedlings in a 2 feet by 4 feet raft, and they space it out to 32 seedlings, 32 plants after 10 days, and after that, to finish off, they go to 16 plants in 2 feet by 4 feet rafts. Okay. And the next one is the ebb and flood system. It's basically, you can use the ebb and flood tables, and in these ebb and flood tables, you can have rafts with the seedlings or the young plants, and you can finish off the crop again in 4 weeks. And the last one is the vertical farming. This is becoming more and more popular in Asia, in Japan and Singapore. Almost more than 100 vertical farms are right now in Japan, and basically you can use the shallow pond system or the raft system, or even you can use the NFT system. Only difference is you will do this production in a vertical farm style with multi-layers. And in the past, the fluorescent lamps are used typically, and now they're switching to the LED lights, and these are grown under sterile conditions. And again, it is not a requirement, but typically it is done that way. Okay. Okay.
All right.
Handing up here. Yes.
Great job, Vijay. I love seeing all those pictures. It gives a nice visual of all the different ways that you can set up your system. And basically, it just depends on, we get the question a lot, how do I know which one is right for me? And basically, it depends on the growing conditions that you have. And if you're starting from scratch or just considering it, you can almost set up any of those that you want, whatever you decide that works best in your situation. So at JRP Laboratory, we see so many different types of systems. It's not like everybody's doing one thing. So feel free to be flexible and consider all of the different ones you see. All right, so your water source. I know you all have heard this before, but it's so absolutely important when it comes to hydroponics. A complete laboratory analysis should be completed from an outside lab once a year. This basically gives you your benchmark of what you're starting with. And you should also be set up to do some sort of in-house testing at home. So you need to have a good pH and EC meter to be able to look at some numbers yourself on a regular basis. Some growers look at these numbers every single day. Other growers look at it once a week. And some people send a test to a laboratory once a week too. So once again, it ranges from all different types of situations. Okay. So what should be tested? If you're sending your sample out to a laboratory, you should get a comprehensive analysis that gives you a measure of the electrical conductivity or the soluble salts, the pH, alkalinity, all the macro, secondary, and micronutrients, and also some of the other things that we watch for, your fluoride level, your chlorine, your sodium, and your aluminum. So all of those things are extremely important to know what you're starting with. So here is just a nice little guideline for water quality that we sometimes use in greenhouse production, and we've adjusted it to show the higher ranges that we look for when setting up a hydroponics program. So, you know, once again, you'll see many different ranges, especially in the sodium and chloride, but we like to see a water source starting with less than 50 parts per million of sodium and 70 parts per million chloride. Honestly, I truly like to see those numbers a lot lower, but those are our highs. So that's a nice little guideline for you to look at.
Cari, quick question. Are you saying that that water quality is more important than in hydroponics than in typical potted plant production or bedding plant production?
That's correct, Chris. In my opinion, when you are growing plants in a media which is, peat-based or has some perlite or bark or whatever, you have some buffering of that media with the interaction with the roots. When you're talking about hydroponics with plants grown just in either a stream of water or floating in water, the water quality is much more important because you don't have that interaction with the media to kind of buffer nutrient uptake. So yeah, it's super important. Who would think? Water, very important, right?
Gotcha.
Okay, so I would say the number one important aspect of a concept that you're going to be looking at when you're taking a measure of your water is the alkalinity. Your alkalinity is a measure of the buffering capacity of your water, or how it's able to neutralize acid. You see alkalinity all over the place, and you see I put this little test strip there. That was from when my first house, we had this swimming pool that consistently turned green, so I went through these test strips all the time. But you can see how pH and alkalinity are related, but they are not the same thing. Knowing the alkalinity will allow you to determine the trend of the rising or falling pH in your nutrient solution, and this is extremely important. So on the next slide, these are the units that water alkalinity is usually recorded in. Some labs measure it as parts per million of calcium carbonate equivalent. At JRP, that's what we do. But you can also see that or convert it to another well-used unit is mixed equivalent. So here is the recommended ranges for the ideal targets for hydroponics and what we consider to be high and low. Okay, so the next slide, why is this all important? Because these two things, people get confused a lot, alkalinity and pH. And they are related, but they're different. The pH of your water is a one-time snapshot of how acidic or basic it is. So basically, if you take a pH measurement that's like, damn, it's this acidic or this basic. The measure of your alkalinity shows you the effect of the pH over time. So it has to do with buffering capacity. So that's extremely important on the next slide because you really, when you're talking about growing plants hydroponically, you need to try and target an optimal pH. And here you'll see the range between 5.5 and all the way up to 6.2. And why is that range? You hear it in greenhouse too. Well, because that's where your macro, secondary, and micronutrients are most available for the plant to take up. So basically, that's the range where it's easiest for the plants to see the nutrients in the solution and take it up into their leaves. So if your pH is a little bit too high, and you're all probably used to this, you're going to have to do something to drop it down. If it's slightly too low, you may have to do something to bump it back up into the ranges. The sulfuric, nitric, and phosphoric acids are examples of a typical mineral acid that you can use. If you have high pH problems, those are the choices you're going to need to use to really knock it down. Citric acid is an organic acid, very useful, but it doesn't have the staying power as the sulfuric, nitric, or phosphoric. Plus, it's a little more expensive. But if you're going organic, citric acid is one of the choices that you can use. And for the bases, they're there, potassium bicarbonate and potassium hydroxide. Honestly, I rarely see people adding those back. Sometimes you see some potassium bicarb for boosted alkalinity, but in most cases, it's dropping the pH down a bit and neutralizing some alkalinity. All right, so another way that you also are managing your pH is by the choices of the nutrients you're using. So you all know this, if you've been greenhouse growers before, there are certain formulas that have the potential to drop your acidity as they're used, and there are certain that raise your pH over time. So that's just due to the raw materials that we use to make the blends up. So you can see the typical acidic raw materials are urea, ammonium nitrate, and ammonium phosphate. In a hydroponic program, you're going to be using these a little less than you would in a typical greenhouse program, but you will see a heavier reliance on the basic raw materials like calcium nitrate and magnesium nitrate. But balance those correctly, that's going to lead you to good pH management just by choosing the nutrients that you're using. So on this slide, you see is a nice little schematic of how this works. And basically, as the plant takes up the raw materials, so urea and ammonium, it will drop the pH because what is left behind are little H pluses in the solution, and that causes the pH to go down. When the plant is taking up the nitrate form of nitrogen, you'll often see an increase in the nutrient solution because what's left behind are more groupings of hydroxyls, O and H's, and it has a negative. So a little bit of chemistry in there, but you're not going to notice this happening. The only thing you're going to see is when you take your pH reading after you've fed with a bunch of calcium nitrate that your pH of the solution went up a bit. So just interesting.
Cari, question, is it preferable to adjust your pH as much as you can using your fertilizer choice over using acid? And only use acid after you've done it with the fertilizer?
That's a great question, Chris. You know, it's difficult to, every situation is different. If you're using an RO system, then you'll have the ability to really influence your pH with the nutrients you choose because the RO system starts very clean and pure. But if you're using well water that has high alkalinity, the nutrients really aren't going to affect the pH that much, and you'll have to use a mineral acid. That's why your water choice and your water analysis is so, so important because looking at what you're starting with will give you an idea if you need to drop your pH by an actual acid or if you can just rely on the nutrients to do the job. Does that make sense?
Excellent. Get that water tested.
Yeah. So here is, I put this in just because I see this all the time, and we get these questions. When you're measuring electrical conductivity, and this is one of the things you'll be doing at home to measure your nutrient solution strength and also to see that your water quality is where it should be, there's so many nutrients, so many units that it could be listed in, and they all kind of mean the same thing. So you can see them listed here in the little schematic, but it just gives you an idea of how electrical conductivity is measured. So just thought I'd throw that in there. So we talked about the water quality. We talked about just choosing your acidic and basic raw materials, and also if you may have to add or in an acid or base. All of those things come together to find your perfect match on how to grow quality plants. The real goal is just to provide those three things, your water quality, what you're adding, and then your nutrient solutions in adequate quantities, but not excessive, and that's how you're going to get the perfect balance of quality. So honestly, this is where you can lean on people that have been doing this. Like we at Cari Peters, we seem to answer these questions multiple every single day. So getting some advice from your extension agents or people that have been setting these up on a regular basis really, really helps moving forward when you're trying to figure out how to start. Okay. So, oh, there you go, a nice little shameless plug. But like I said, your extension agent can also help you with this too. But at Cari Peters, we do the analysis in our lab. We do it very quickly. And you can call us up and we'll talk to you about how to get everything in a correct balance so that you're ready to go in as little of a hassle as possible when you're setting up your own system. All right. And so let's talk about the nutrients that are out there. So in hydroponics, your goal is to provide all of the nutrients with their 100% soluble so that they're available for the plant to take up by the roots. There's several different options out there. You can see the pictures of them here. So we're going to talk today about single element mixes, some water-soluble concentrates that are already out there, and then our complete one-bag formula. So on the next slide, you'll see this is, I thought this was kind of neat. This is, I don't know how many of you are excellent bakers. So if you can make a mean batch of brownies from scratch, you will be a fantastic single element mixer, because basically you're coming up with your own recipe to add each individual nutrient into your concentrate or your, final dilution tank. Now, there are several advantages to this. It's very inexpensive to buy bulk raw materials, and your ability to modify each element is just super easy because, hey, I'll add, I need an extra part per million today or 10 parts per million, and you can add that right in. The disadvantages is that it is inexpensive, but you have to purchase in bulk. So if you don't have somewhere to store a pallet of calcium nitrate, then this may not be the way to go for you. Also, it's labor intensive. You have to, actually mix up and weigh batches of everything. And you can see in the one picture there can be mixing mistakes. There is a method to the madness of fertilizer blending, and if you don't get the stepwise correct, you can get precipitates very easily. So I just thought these little mixtures and recipes that I have on the slide kind of put a neat perspective on what people do. And a lot of people do single element mixes out there. So what you'll also see on the market is pretty typical of how people get started, is using existing water-soluble concentrates and putting them into a tank A and tank B type scenario. So tank A is typically something like a 5, 12, 26. It gives you a lower nitrogen but a higher phosphorus and potassium and balances all your micronutrients in there. And then your tank B is just calcium or just calcium nitrate. And you take double injectors and get those things together so that in final dilution they won't precipitate. And basically, that's the issue with hydroponics. You can't mix certain things together in concentrate, or it will make this chalky mess. So you see those pictures there. That is what happens when you mix calcium and sulfur together. You get this white, gloppy mixture on the bottom of your concentration tank, and it really gums things up. So the advantages of the water-soluble concentrates is you can buy them in the 25-pound bags that you're used to, and they're blended correctly, so very little mixing mistakes. The disadvantages is double injectors. You absolutely need them. And you can't use typical greenhouse formulas. So, you know, you're not throwing in your triple 20 with some blossom booster here. That's not going to work. And that's basically it. So this newest formula that we have out there is the complete one-bag solution. So my company at Cari Peters and Oasis Grower Solutions have put together this formula called Oasis Hydroponic. It's the 16-4-17, and it is a one-bag program that delivers all of the essential elements that you need for growing hydroponic lettuce, herbs, green, and most vegetables. You know, what's different with this is that we came together and, gosh, it's many years of research, over 5 years of just playing around with this to put this formula together. And what we found was when we blend these nutrients, they're 100% water soluble and able to eliminate all the mixing errors even that the two-tank system has. We nailed down the level of soluble and available magnesium and calcium for the plants and looked at the level of phosphorus and the nitrogen breakdown and came up with this formula that's just fantastic. And the benefit of it is it's one bag. So you put it in your normal concentrate tank and use your normal one injector, and you're good to go. Okay, so Vijay is going to talk to you a little bit now about how this all kind of comes together in young plant production and some of the research that we did. Right, Vijay?
Yep. Thank you, Cari, for all the basics. That's wonderful. And now let's get to the business of growing plants. And in this section, you will see the media options that are available and the nutrient program you should be employing during this young plant production, and the watering methods or techniques that you can use during young plant production. And also, we will end with the protocol for successful seedling production. And again, the key for successful hydroponic production is starting with strong young plants. I walked into several hydroponic facilities. They have brand new facility. Everything will be looking great, but the propagation area will be somewhere in the northeast corner, low lit, extra shading, and the seedlings look stretched and so on. So we'll walk through this, and there are a lot of interesting, important tips to take home. Okay? Okay. What is the role of media? The role of media is to start seedlings or the young plants, and then in hydroponics, once you transplant these seedlings into the main system, basically this media becomes like a stabilizing material. It's just like an anchoring media or a stabilizing material into the main system. And it can also, at the very end, when you're harvesting, it can also act as a water reservoir to improve the shelf life. Okay? The earlier slide, yeah, thank you, Chris, sorry about that. The types of propagation media you can broadly classify into two. One is the loose media, and it's perlite, and the other one is the peatite-based. Perlite is, again, it's a volcanic rock base heated to 1,000 degrees C, and peatite is a combination of peat and perlite. And some of the stabilized media that are available are the Oasis Hardicubes XL and Rockwool. Okay? Okay, here is a slide with the loose media, and the top one is with the peatite, and you can, growers, again, they can fill their own trays with peatite mix, And you can see that the seedling, the second photo is a seedling that is ready to be transplanted, and then you can transplant into the draft system there. And the bottom one is just with perlite. And some of the features and our benefits and the drawbacks with this system, it's very inexpensive. Again, you can fill your own tray, but the problem is it can be inconsistent in seedling growth, because when you're filling your own tray, if you're compacting or if you're loose filling, that all determines the quality of the young plant you're going to get. And it can be messy in the production and packaging, and also it can act as a breeding ground if you have peat lying around in the propagation system or in the main system. And also the peat can promote algae growth and also for the fungus gnats and so on. And especially the degrading organic matter can compete for the oxygen, because it creates a situation like a biological oxygen demand, and it competes with the oxygen. Okay. Okay, the next one is the Oasis Hardy Cubes XL. It's a thermoset phenolic-based foam. It's an engineered media with optimal air-water ratio, which promotes uniform germination and vigorous seedling growth. And also the Hardy Cube XL, it's the specialized density promotes faster, easy rooting, and also much fibrous root system for quick takeoff in the main system. It's a sterile, pathogen-free, so don't have to worry about any diseases. No buffering capacity, and there is no fertilizer. This offers maximum flexibility to the growers so that they can steer in any direction they want. And it has also a dibble hole. It's precise. You can use automation, and it's available in different configurations and sizes, so to offer flexibility with your propagation and production scheduling. Okay? Here is a photograph with the Hardy Cube XL, and we have lettuce, butterhead Rex on the left side at 7 days after seeding. You can see the seedling growth. It's very uniform. The cotyledonous leaves are developing, and you can see the true leaves are emerging. And by that time, already you can see the roots are penetrating the bottom of the foam within 7 days. And in 15 days, these have true leaves, and it's ready for transplant. You can see that on the right side of the slide here. Okay.
Hey, Vijay, while we're looking at the sheets of foam here, Brian wants to know what the dimension is of the sheets.
The sheets these are standard 10 inches wide by 20 inches long. They fit into a standard greenhouse tray, and the thickness of this material is 1.5 inch. But these come in different configuration, like 50 count, 104 count, 162, and 50 count. I'm sorry, 276 count.
Very good. And everybody, you'll note that Cari answered a question that somebody had about cost of a water test. $40, cheap at half the price. So thanks for that. All right, Vijay.
Okay, and then the next stabilized media that is popular in the industry is rock wool, and it's mined from basalt rock, and it's liquefied at 1,000 degrees C, and it's spun bound. It's also an inert material, and it's sterile. It also promotes uniform seedling growth, available in different geometries, like, as I said, like the foam. It's also available in 200 and 98 count. And the dibble holes are not, uniformly in depth, so it can pose a little challenge with automation. And one other thing is that these are fibers that can, when you're dealing with that, the fibers can go into your skin and cause irritation. The media needs to be the pH adjusted to 5.6, 5.7 when you're starting the seedlings. Okay. Okay, the nutrient program during seedling propagation, when to apply and how much to apply. And moving on to the next slide, when we talk to the hydroponic growers, everybody does something different. We have growers all the way, they start the fertilizer program right with the initial seeding, and some growers start after cotyledonous leaves are developed, and some growers start after 4 or 5 days. And typical practice is to start 2 to 3 days after seeding, and the standard protocol is to start with a low concentration of fertilizer, 50 ppm, and then when they're ready to transplant, after 10 days, between 10 and 15 days, they go to a higher concentration, that is 120 to 150 ppm. And if you ask why nutrients are not applied with initial watering, the answers will be generally it is believed that it is not required. And it is true that if you look into any hydroponic textbooks, it says that you don't have to apply fertilizer from the very beginning, just start with the clear water. And then, and it is true because seed has reserves, but it may not be the case when you're dealing with hydroponics, especially dealing with a synthetic media. We will talk about that in the next few slides. And also, if you ask growers why you're not using fertilizer, they say it's not necessary, so I don't want to waste my money. And they can also say that it will cause phytotoxicity when I apply nutrients in the very beginning. So is this the right protocol or not? We will see in the next few slides. Okay, this is a slide here. On the left side, you see the graph. On the x-axis, you have 6 treatments, and on the y-axis, it's the lettuce seedling fresh weight of the shoots. We harvested lettuce after 14 days, and we took the fresh weight of these seedlings. Treatment 1 and 2 are started with clear water, first one with the tap water and second one with rainwater, and 3 and 4 are with only macronutrients, 3 with 150 ppm, 4 with 300, and 5 with a standard greenhouse fertilizer, and 6 with the Oasis hydroponic fertilizer Cari mentioned earlier. And here you can see that clearly, and also I want to make one other thing clear, that only the difference is the first 3 days. After that, after 3 days onwards, all these treatments were watered with 150 ppm fertilizer. And you can see the clear trend here that when you are putting any type of fertilizer, you are with treatment 3 until 6, you are getting a significant increase in the shoot growth. And also, the other thing that comes very clear from this graph is that it is not just the macronutrients that are necessary, because you look at 5 and 6, when it is a complete fertilizer, you are getting a further increase in the shoot growth. And also look at number 6, it's not any complete fertilizer. You got to make sure that the pH is right and all the nutrients are the proper balance. When you're using that completely balanced fertilizer, you will get almost 100% improvement in shoot growth just by using a complete balanced fertilizer with initial watering. Okay, so here and here is a photograph just to show you. On the left side is the clear water, started with clear water, and from day 3 onwards, fertilized with 150 ppm. On the right side, it started with the initial watering, with the initial saturation of the foam. It was started with 150 ppm nitrogen with complete fertilizer, and you can see 100% improvement in growth here in this photograph.
So in other words, Vijay, if you're waiting even just a couple of days before applying fertilizer, you're missing a lot of growth opportunity.
Yes, exactly. And the reason is simple, very simple, Chris. The reason is that when you're watering with clear water, with any synthetic media, the clear water is around that root zone, and when you're coming back with the fertilizer 3 days later, the fertilizer is not making its way readily into that root zone. Even if it's making its way, it's not at the concentration you're applying. So basically, that whole delay you're seeing, and as a result, you're cutting down the growth. Yeah. So basically, if you apply the fertilizer right on, you will see that benefit. Okay. Here is also, again, if you talk to the hydroponic grower, again, everybody will say something different. Hey, I'm starting with 50 ppm nitrogen, and then I'm going to 125. So here is a study we did. This is a replication of different varieties and so on, but here I'm presenting only with the Butterhead Rex variety. And on the left side, you see the graph. There are 6 treatments, and on the y-axis, you can see the fresh weight of lettuce. Okay, and again, the lettuce was harvested at 14 days after seeding, and this is the fresh weight of that lettuce. Treatment 1 is the one that is started with clear water, and we applied fertilizer, 150 ppm fertilizer 3 days later, okay? And the treatment 2 is with 50 ppm fertilizer all the way through propagation for the 15 days. 3 is with 75 ppm nitrogen, full fertilizer, 4 with 100, 5 with 125, and 6 with 150. You can see with the increase in the fertilizer from 50 to 125 ppm, there is a gradual and statistically significant increase in the lettuce fresh weight. And if you can see that with number 5, which is at 125 ppm, this Oasis hydroponic fertilizer, you're getting the maximum benefit. With, for example, here, with the clear water, you're getting only 100 grams of lettuce, whereas with treatment 5, when you start with the right fertilizer, you're getting 175 grams of lettuce within the first 2 days, okay? So the take-home message is that you start with fertilizer and use the optimal concentration, 125 ppm, and beyond that, if you go beyond 125 ppm, there is no further improvement in the earlier slide. Sorry, my computer started acting a little bit here, but now it's good. In the next slide, this slide, what we're showing here is the seedling growth started with clear water, and after 3 days, watered with 150 ppm fertilizer, complete fertilizer, and on the right side, started with 125 ppm full fertilizer, and you can see this is a pictorial presentation of the earlier graph. So again, the take-home message is start with fertilizer from the initial watering and use the right concentration, which is 125 ppm.
Vijay, Sam wants to know if there'd be a benefit to actually wetting the growing media with fertilizer prior to seeding, or is that unnecessary? Yep.
That is very good. That is very good question, Sam. That's what actually the initial watering of the material, when you're first watering, when you take the dry media, water that with fertilizer. Otherwise, if you water with the clear water, and again, if you go with fertilizer, it will not go in the right concentration. It will be diluted by 50% or so. So to answer your exact question, yes, with the initial water, initial soaking, you have to use fertilizer.
Ah, the soaking even before the sowing. Good. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Typically with the hydroponics, what the way you do is any media, rock wool or even foam or any type of media, you take the media, you put the seed, and then you water it. That's because it's you can use automation when you're seeding dry. So put the seed into the dry material, and with your initial soaking, use that complete fertilizer. Okay?
So don't soak before you sow. Okay, that's interesting.
Yes. I mean, it can be done either way, but in hydroponics, typically you seed first and then soak it later.
All right.
Okay. Okay. Again, if you're not getting the growth as I described earlier, when you're using the light levels and so on, by 15 days, you should get a true leaf and roots penetrating out of the bottom. And if you're not experiencing that growth, please call us, and our customer people will forward your call to me or our technical support person, Michael Wiebe, and we'll be more than happy to answer any of your calls and provide any support that is required. Okay. That next one is the watering method. And again, basically, the watering method you can broadly classify into overhead irrigation system and the sub-irrigation system. And watering frequency is extremely important in hydroponics. A lot of people have this misconception that, oh, this is hydroponics, and I have to water it constantly. And actually, you're not doing any good to your seedlings when you're overwatering. Water as required. We will see that in the next slides, that watering frequency and the method of watering are very important. Here is a slide with overhead irrigation on the left side, It's a boom irrigation system. You have booms with misters on, and you can use that for your propagation, or you can use your hose and a breaker to overhead water your seedlings, okay? And actually, I like this the most, the overhead watering, because the oxygen is at the interface of air and water, the droplet. Around the droplet, you have oxygen. So the finer the droplet size, more the oxygen you're putting into the propagation media. So this is one of the best recommended method of watering when you're growing your young plants, okay? And again, water just as required once a day or every alternate day, but don't water in excess, okay? The next one is the sub-irrigation. You have the sub-irrigation on the troughs, on the first and second, it's a Crop King, and the second is the Hydro, and then the third one is the ebb and flood system. Actually, the very benefit, the advantage with the sub-irrigation is you're applying this fertilizer right to that root zone. You're not putting on the foliage at all. So this is a good thing that you can do with this, but it is very common to overwater with the sub-irrigation, because when you're watering from the bottoms up, there's very limited gravitational pull. So you can oversaturate the media, and the media will be super saturated, and then you will end up having lazy roots. So make sure that you're watering just as required every day or every alternate day, and choose the suitable geometry. For example, use a propagation media that has grooves at the bottom so that excess water or the media is coming out and has more oxygen at the root zone, okay? And then water as required just once a day or every alternate day, and it is not required to water constantly 24/7, okay?
Now, Vijay, Tanya wants to know if you want to keep, and this would be lettuce seedlings specifically, keep the media evenly moist, no dry down cycles on lettuce?
Yeah, actually with the seed, yes, you should not have totally dry down cycles, but at the same time, you should not water constantly also, because you have dry down cycles means, for example, water it today, rock wool or foam, it should hold water very well for at least 2 days, even when it is cloudy day. If it is a sunny day, if the temperature is high, then water maybe once a day, that should be sufficient enough. And so that you have the roots have sufficient time to drain out, and you have oxygen around that root zone. Okay, and here is the protocol for successful seedling production. And again, as I said, saturate the media with complete nutrient fertilizer with 125 ppm, and the recommended temperature is 65 to 68. And it needs to be high humidity, and darkness is actually an advantage. You will start with a uniform seedling, okay? It is not required to water during day 2 and day 3, just mist, but it is very important to move if you're germinating your seeds in darkness, make sure you move your seedlings or germinating seed into light right at 48 hours. Any delay beyond 48 hours can stretch your seedlings. You will see the seedlings getting stretched. So it is important to move your seedlings to the full light. And again, mist on day 3. And for the temperatures, 65 to 75 daytime, night temperatures 55 to 60. And the relative humidity is 60 to 70. And it's very important, the light levels. The lettuce, you can produce a really high quality seedling within 10 days when you provide high light level. And lettuce actually can take really high light level, like 500 to 600 micromoles, and you can provide as high as 20 moles per day, and you can actually provide 24 hours. So actually don't provide extra shading, or don't grow your seedlings in a northeast corner, because you will not end up having a high quality seedling. So make sure they are in a properly lit area, okay? And from day 4 onwards, water with the complete fertilizer just as required once a day or every alternate day, but it is not required to water constantly, okay? As I said, excessive shading can slow down the growth and cause stretching of the seedlings. Again, consider supplemental lighting during winter months, otherwise you will end up having extra stretch seedlings. Okay. Cari, you want to talk about this slide?
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. Thank you, Vijay. So I hope you all really enjoyed some of that info. When we were going through our research, it was really neat to see the differences. And I know those are pictures on slides, and I hope you can kind of see how the lettuce was such a different growth in the 125 parts per million and compared to the clear water or the other treatments. But it was pretty neat to see in person. So from that, we looked at a whole bunch of different crops grown with our fertilizer and several different ones, and we came up with target seed rates based on what we thought would be an adequate parts per million of nitrogen, and then also what we thought overall would be a good level. So what we found that in propagation for these, and you'll see on the chart, for all these different types of crops grown, 125 parts per million really seemed to be the level that the plants took off at and were able to grow in a nice fresh weight and also very established root system in a fast period of time. And then as you moved into full production, you'll see some variation in the target seed rate. But every time that we're looking at this, and we say 125 parts per million, that's parts per million nitrogen, and that's just the way that fertilizers are always kind of described when you're talking about this. It's not total parts per million. Sometimes we get questions at our laboratory about total parts per million and parts per million nitrogen. All of these target seed rates are based on the parts per million nitrogen. So it's just a neat little generalized target rates for you guys to take home and look at. All right, so now, I love these pictures, but we did put some frequently asked questions that we receive once in a while, so I thought maybe that if you all wanted to hear some of them, or if you have your own questions, we'll be happy to answer them. But Vijay, you want to do this one?
Yes. Should I cover my seed with vermiculite? And that's one of the frequently asked questions. The first thing is, if you cover with vermiculite or if you don't cover with vermiculite, as I earlier said, start with fertilizer with your initial saturation, and the difference is day and night with just the 2-day, how much difference it can make. So here it is with the vermiculite. Again, with the lettuce, it germinates very quickly. Within 48 hours, you can see the radicle emerging, and then you can see the cotyledonous leaves emerging and so on. So typically it is not required to use vermiculite on the top, but especially when you're in summer when the temperatures are high, the vermiculite do help. If you have, because the vermiculite again holds moisture, and you have seedlings that are starting very uniformly. So using a vermiculite on the top is not a bad idea. Sometimes you see push outs with foam or with rock wool, and using vermiculite can totally avoid any of these push outs of these seedlings out of this hole. So using vermiculite is not a bad practice. It doesn't really cut down the production time or increase. Again, you can have a template that is matching to the dibble hole, and you can just top dress your seeds with the vermiculite, and it does do a good job with uniform seedling growth.
Actually, Vijay, that might have just answered a question that Hank had. He says, my seedlings germ, but then as the plants grow, they're pushed out of the horticubes by root growth. How can we prevent this?
Yes, again, using vermiculite is one way to do that, and also, again, we can talk again. The pushouts is because the roots are elongating, the roots are growing, and they are not, because sometimes when you don't water it thoroughly, For example, if there are any dry pockets, if there is any extra wetting agents, the roots starts to elongate, but they will not grow into the foam. So you will see some push out. So two ways to fix that. One is properly water thoroughly and not to have any dry spots. And the other way to fix this is to put just a little bit of vermiculite, top dress with vermiculite, the fine grade, and that should solve the whole issue of pushouts.
Get it down into the dibble holes.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
This is something we see a lot at our lab is foliage burn. Why am I seeing it? It's stunting. We have, obviously little toasty, crispy lettuce things that I'm sure you all tried. You, in one way or another, have done this on purpose or not. Most of that has to do with nutrient phytotoxicity, and that could be from two things. One, a fertilizer that's not made with the highest quality nutrients. So there's a lot of nutrients out there on the marketplace. You need to make sure in hydroponics that you're using the highest grade technical grade nutrients so that they are 100% water soluble and available to the plant. Most of those have a very low salt index. And the other thing that's super important is that they don't have all the extras in there. So when you look at a label, you'll see nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and where they're derived from. What you'll never see on there is the extras. So that means, low levels of arsenic, cadmium, selenium, sometimes you'll even see lead. So you need to make sure you're choosing the highest quality raw materials when you're either blending your own or choosing a mix. And like I said, our Oasis Hydroponic is made by JRP, and we only use the highest quality raw materials, so you're safe with us. But you'll see some of this foliage burn if you're trying to use something else. And then sometimes you'll see it just burn from too high of a rate. So you thought you were supposed to be mixing something, and then for some reason it was the wrong calculation, and you just put way too high of a total parts per million on there and just toasted them. So we see it a lot. It happens.
Yeah. Cari, can I add one other thing? I just would like to add that if you are seeing toxicity or this kind of burn in your young plant area, don't, and again, when you're starting to fertilize from the very beginning, you may see something like this. But this should not hold you back not to fertilize, to delay the fertilizing program. It's only that because you're using a fertilizer that has high salt index, and it is causing that. You pick a right fertilizer and use that fertilizer from the very beginning. Okay?
All right, and the other thing that we see is tip burn quite a bit. So this is in production. You'll start, and the pictures show it really well. You'll see that the plant all of a sudden will show this like edge curling, kind of like rubbery look. And we often just call that tip burn. A lot of times that has to do with the humidity level that you're growing in. As you know, some nutrients move with water into the plant. If your relative humidity is either too high or too low, this can greatly affect how the nutrients are taken up into the plant. So a lot of times you'll see this tip burn, these symptoms like this, because the plant isn't taking up the calcium correctly. So you might actually have enough calcium in your nutrient solution, but because the plants aren't transpiring at the correct rate because the humidity is a bit off, you'll start to see this. It's easily fixed. However, the burned parts of the tissues don't get better. You just have to remove them and start again. So anything on that, Vijay?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. So again, as the weather gets, the temperature goes high and the humidity goes high, you will see this problem. A paddle fan, which again can help. You have a paddle fan on the top, so you have the wind blowing down, so it can disturb the air in that shoot tip area and promote transpiration. So you can use a paddle fan to disturb that boundary, the air at the boundary, and to improve transpiration. Okay.
All right, a little bit like bract edge bird on poinsettias, I think. We've got a few other questions here. Let me pop through them real quick and see if we can tackle them. Edward wants to know, in a closed nutrient system, why would the concentration matter if the plants can still get the nutrients?
Well, Ed, I just read that question, and I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean, but because I was trying to figure out how to answer you. You know, the concentration matters because we're trying to come up with the correct balance to start. So I'm thinking maybe you're asking, as the plants keep recycling it, should they, I'm not exactly sure, are they losing concentration? What do you think, Vijay? Do you know?
Yeah, I think what I'm thinking here in this situation is, again, you're starting with certain concentration. Of course, as Cari said, the proportion is very important, okay? And the plants are taking up water and utilizing the nutrients. And when you're recirculating, when this transpiration and the plants are taking up water, the water depletes. So you will add up fresh water, clear water again. So then you have to add new fertilizer to, again, bring it back to the optimal concentration. Does that answer that question? Or
if not, he can email you guys individually, because I think we do have your emails at the end. So if he wants more detail. Here's a question from Ryan about should you be checking your pH and your EC in the young plant cubes when you're in the seedling process? Should you be monitoring pH?
Yeah. In the young plant, we did a lot of trials. Again, during propagation, it is, with all the trials we did, it is not required to check the pH and EC in the young plant area, as long as you are starting to use the right pH and the EC, the fertilizer you're using. As long as you monitor that, you don't have to worry about anything in the media, because again, if you're using foam, again, it doesn't have any buffering capacity. It takes the pH of the nutrient solution. But is this true for every media? Maybe not true, because again, it depends on the media type. If there is some other media which has a high dolomitic lime, then it keeps on, it has buffering action and it raises the pH as it goes. But in foam, it is not required.
All right. David wants to know, is there an optimal day length for lettuce seedlings?
Optimal day length. Again, the minimum I would recommend is 12 hours, and you can go with the lettuce as long as 24 hours without any night break, and the lettuce just do just fine, and you can have seedlings within 10-12 days. But minimum I would provide 10 to 12 hours with a high light level, high intensity, at least 500 to 600 micromoles. If you go shorter than 300, 400 micromoles, you will see stretching a little bit. But the day length, 10 to 12, yes.
All right. Tanya wants to know, same question, but then adds, is it different for propagation versus production? So 10 to 12 hours minimum for propagation. What about production? Same thing?
Production, yes, very good question. Production is much more sensitive. You want to go, again, the earlier question I had was what was the minimum. That's why I said 12 to 14. You can go as long as 24 hours with propagation. With production, you want to go anywhere between 14 to 16 hours. The more you go, it's not good, especially it causes all this tip burn and other issues. But you want to be anywhere between 12 to 14 hours for production.
All right. Daniel wants to know, what would you recommend to prevent fungus and algae growth within your entire hydroponic system?
That's a good question. You know, again, if you're using rock wool or foam and a lot of these media, these doesn't have any, these doesn't bring any of this fungus, you know, the algae or anything like that. It is coming from basically from the water source. So monitor your water source, especially in the propagation area. Start with clean water, and And actually, I recommend not to recirculate too much in the propagation area because you're going to take that algae into the production area. One thing is, especially wherever these if you're using an NFT system, wherever the nutrient solution is coming out at the end, close those ends. Whenever it gets exposed for a long period of time, that will promote algae growth. So covering those ends will help, but again, you got to monitor mainly it's coming from your water.
All right. Brian says he gets algae on his rock wool and wondered if Oasis had the same issue, but you're saying it's a water issue, not a medium issue, yeah?
Yeah, water issue, and also definitely watering frequency is also a big issue. If you are keeping your media too wet for a prolonged period of time, constantly irrigating and so on, that will actually promote. So again, keeping the surface dry for a little bit will help. But again, you don't want to run it too dry either. But again, every alternate day watering should minimize some of these issues.
All right, got a couple more here. Brian says, wants to know, can too high an EC affect calcium uptake, resulting in the tip burn that you showed in those photos?
Yeah, it definitely can. There are certain macronutrients that are antagonistic to secondaries, and the macros are N, P, and K, and the secondaries are calcium. So, you know, if you are overdoing it on nitrogen or potassium, sometimes you see if you have a high, like the N number, a higher potassium at the end, you'll see some calcium deficiency. But yeah, it definitely is a ratio that needs to be followed. So yeah, if you're overdoing it on NPK, you can oftentimes see the tip burn. But once again, it's easily fixed.
Yeah, and Rob wants to know, can you use calcium chloride spray to help prevent edge burn during production?
Yeah, I mean, calcium chloride dihydrate is something that you often see used for poinsettias, you know, to get some foliar calcium because you think, okay, put it right on the leaves. You can do it. You do it at a much, much lower parts per million. So I think the poinsettia rate was like 300-something parts per million. When you're doing it on lettuce, it's much lower. Like I think it's, I'd have to look it up, but I think it's around 100 parts per million because the thing that you're also spraying on there is chloride, and that is not so good for the lettuce. So you're using it about a third the rate as you would for the poinsettia type thing. But yeah, it can be used.
All right, two more, and then we're going to have to sign off, I think. And this is a good one here, if one only needs a one-bag fertilizer system, which Oasis is now offering, why is a water test important?
Ooh, that is a great question.
I don't have 40 bucks to throw around, Cari. Come on.
I know. Come on, Chris. Yeah, that is a fantastic question. So when we were developing this, we went back and forth. Wouldn't it be nice if we could make a one-bag fertilizer that was just perfect for everyone? And we couldn't do it. So the water test is extremely important to make sure that this one-bag fertilizer will work for your system. And what we found is it works for about 80% of the water types in the U.S. But if you are a person that has extremely high alkalinity and it comes from a sodium and a magnesium source, it's not going to be the right fit for you. So a water test is super important just to know if it's going to be a perfect match. So, yeah, you have to give me the $40 if you like it or not.
All right.
At the same time, if somebody's using RO water, also this is not the right fertilizer for them also.
Yeah, it works in propagation, but not for production.
That's production.
Gotcha. All right. Well, there are other questions out there, and I apologize we can't get to them, and they seem to be rolling in now. It's a bit of a landslide. However, if you've got more questions, here are Cari and Vijay's email addresses and even their telephone numbers right down to the extension. So you can see they're eager to talk about it. So jot these down right now, write them down so that you can send them your specific questions either right away or later on. And there was one other question, and that is, will the slide deck be available? Now, the webinar is going to be available, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but the actual slides or actual images won't be unless Cari or Vijay want to part with it. So I'll leave that up to them, and you can email them directly and mooch it off of them. Just don't go out and do another webinar on it. It's patented or trademarked or something. So, so you got that. You can rewatch the webinar and actually forward fast to any of the parts of it, any of the charts or graphs or what have you. Just go to ballpublishing.com/webinars. That's where you'll find that. Same place you signed up, and that'll be up hopefully within an hour or two after we conclude this webinar. And let's see, I should have taken this slide out because that's an old one there, so never mind that. I do have an upcoming webinar, but it's not until May, so I'll be promoting that later on. But I do want to give special thanks to our sponsor. One last thanks to Oasis Grower Solutions and Cari Peters, who made Cari and Vijay available to us today. So thanks so much for that. And really, that's pretty much it. So for Cari and Vijay, and all the folks at Oasis Grower Solutions and Cari Peters and Ball Publishing, this is Chris Beytes saying so long, everybody.